Big sky, big potential. This is Eastern Promise. Welcome to episode 64 of the Eastern Promise podcast, where the huge potential of the East of England is beaming direct to you, wherever you are. Stand ready for opportunity galore. Across our region, our local shop is a white and green beacon of delight. But convenience stores are only one part of what the East of England Co-op does in and for our communities. And who better to ask than my guest, Doug Field OBE, Chief Executive of the East of England Co-op. Doug will be sharing how the East of England Co-op has embedded its core values in everything it does. And finally, dinner is served. But who in our region do you want as your dream dinner party guests? Let's check the play settings for some crowd sorcery. In certain political circles, it's become fashionable to sneer at companies that hold true to strong values. But how much richer, more vibrant and cherished are values-based businesses who put themselves at the heart of their communities? Or, as my guest today, Chief Executive of the East of England Cooperative, Doug Field OBE, put it far more succinctly, do the right thing, even when no one's looking. To find out more, I met Doug at the East of England Co-op's HQ at Whersted Park in Suffolk. Doug Field OBE, Chief Executive of the East of England Co-op. Doug, it is a pleasure to welcome you to Eastern Promise.
Thank you, Mike. Pleasure to be here. Really enjoy it. Looking forward to it.
Just give us, if you would, please, the potted history of Doug Field.
Okay, so born in East Yorkshire, or Humberside as it then was, in the shadow of the Humber Bridge. So in a little town called Beverley, lived right literally in the shadow of the Humber Bridge. Went to university in North Wales, got a job in Cheltenham, working for an accountancy firm, moved to Bristol for an accountancy firm, a big one, PwC, had some really interesting clients, including Dyson, and a whole mix and range, did a bit of overseas travel as part of that. Then left sort of practice, joined a professional business services firm with a sort of central service office in Milton Keynes. Met someone from East Anglia, ended up in East Anglia.
Do you know, I wonder, doing a straw poll, the number of people who said, met someone from Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridge, Essex, and ended up here, because that's what happened to me. That's what happened to my sister-in-law's husbands and partners. It's a very common story, I think. But
it's also
excellent.
Really interesting, isn't it, Mike? Because I would never have been here, because it's the unexplored bit. But now I'm here, I don't want to move.
Exactly.
But it's like that untapped potential of the area is frightening. The beaches of Norfolk, the Suffolk coast, it's priceless, and yet it's not well known.
Well, indeed, and well, hopefully, this is what we're going to start to change, and to shout about what we have here, and with people. I know people all across the world listening. In Wales, apparently, my little widget now tells me they've slowly on the back podcast widget expanded it so you can see. For example, there's quite in the US. There's listeners steady. Most of our listeners are in Virginia and California.
Wow.
And it's finally got to the UK. But that's only at nation level. So I can see obviously England's the vast majority, and Wales. I was like, well, hey, that's brilliant, great news. For those who don't know, I'm from the Northwest, so I grew up, my parents taking me to the CWS store in Lee.
Yeah.
For everything. And, my grandparents were all buried in co-op funerals. It's just, I'm familiar with it, but for those who don't know, what is a cooperative society?
Well, a co-op is a way of doing business. A A cooperative society is different to a limited company. It's owned by its members, and we've got over 200,000 members in the region who support us. And we're a combination of businesses. So there's retail cooperatives, which are the ones you see, the food stores, the funeral branches, but there's a whole ream of cooperatives. John Lewis Waitrose is a cooperative, employee-owned cooperative. Lots of champagne growers in France are cooperatives as well.
Oh, oui.
So, as are some of the fruit producers, there's agricultural cooperatives, two big ones in our region, Family and Farmers, Anglia Farmers.
I was going to say Anglia Farmers.
But there's a lot of independent retail cooperatives. So the CGWS you mentioned, that is now through a history of mergers Co-op Group. They've got their headquarters in Manchester, and they're the largest retail cooperative in our...
They're the blue ones,
The blue ones, yeah, at the moment, yeah. And then there's a number of other co-ops. Central Co-op, they took over Anglia Regional, and they're across the centre of the England. There's mid-counties, Lincolnshire, Chelmsford Star, and there's the East of England Co-op. So not all co-ops have all the same businesses. So a lot of us have food and funeral businesses. Not all have funeral businesses now with the regulation. We've also got a travel business, which is a consortium along with mid-counties. We've got petrol filling stations. We've got a stonemasonry business. And yeah, so a number of the little sort of businesses who've got our own distinct family of businesses.
I mean, what's many people will know the stores, especially if you've come back to Norwich Station late at night, and there it is, the last shop standing with hot food and drinks and chocolate and desperate times, and you can find what you need there. And you've answered my second question already. Now, cooperatives stand out really as a values-based business.
Absolutely.
So what are the values that you see the East of England Co-op as embodying? And just to come back on your previous point, having travelled, I travel regularly to the Midlands, and I don't see an organisation, a co-op, with the same visibility that the green and white of the East of England Co-op has. So congratulations, that's brilliant.
Thank you.
But what are the values that the East of England Co-op embodies?
Well, going back to your original question about cooperatives, there's 10 cooperative values and principles, which we've disseminated into 4 more everyday ones. We want to be stronger together. We want to be unstoppable. We want to be a place for people to grow, and we want to do the right thing. So there's the 4 values that we've disseminated, our co-op values and principles, into the everyday, trying to get into the everyday life of our colleagues. And the do the right thing is about doing the right thing, even if nobody's watching. Yeah. So it's not about the greenwashing that some other businesses do. It's all about literally, doing it because it's the right thing to do.
I mean, that I've read your annual report, and that really does come through loud and clear. And I'll hopefully we'll come on to that. How would you say in the day-to-day that the various businesses, because you've got a security firm as well, I believe.
Yeah.
How would you say that the Co-op family, the East of England Co-op family, embody those values on a day-to-day basis?
Well, we're working hard, and wish we'd chosen a different room for this interview because we've a doll on the wall. We've got but no, we're trying to work hard to get those examples, and we're trying to bring it into the day-to-day life, promote those areas about working together. So trying to work cross-functionally, look at the everyday, get people out in stores, looking at what's happening on a real thing. So we changed some of our central food operations team. Have now got people who've worked in store more than just people who sit behind a computer screen. We're trying to have fun at work, so we did a big thing for the coronation. One of our regional leaders even did a Union Jack on his bald head, which was brilliant, and had a bowler hat ready for the weather in case it rained. So we're doing everything to have fun at work. We want to widen our membership appeal, and to do that, we've got to embody all those 4 values, and yet we want to grow our business. And I think that growth is the oxygen for businesses, and we want to be a place for people to grow. And to do that, we've got to have a successful region as well.
I think this comes up a lot when I'm talking to various people in the East of England. It came up when I interviewed Drs Ben Little and Dr Johanna Forster about the UEA, University of East Anglia Civic University, and they described it to me. And I'm going to say to you what I said to them. What you have described there, in particular, I'm thinking about doing the right when even though no one's looking, is leadership. It's how leadership, certainly how leadership should be, that you do the right thing regardless of what it means for you. And just ask you to invite you to reflect on that, because I'm just really struck by what you've said and how that embodies leadership, not just your leadership, but the leadership of the East of England Co-op in the various spheres that you operate.
No, I think that's important. I think leadership is is fundamental now. I think the leadership model's changed, and I think over time, from when I started my career many years ago, and I suppose I should have said I started. My first job was in a convenience store in West Hull. So, but I think these days it's my role I see is very much to improve the daily lives of our colleagues and customers by inspiring people to be the best they can be. And I think it's summed up by going back to my northern roots, a rugby league player, Kevin Sinfield, and he said, "I always felt my job was to help people be better than they believe." I think that's what leadership is these days. I think that's really
absolutely
important.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I want Eastern Promise to embody is that we are much stronger, much wiser, much braver than we think we are. As a region, we've got our own individual capabilities and weaknesses. Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Cambridgeshire. But put those all together and find a way. You know, you can't fit a jigsaw together every. You've got to find the right fit. But once we've done that, we just can unlock something very special. But you talk about your members, and membership organisations take various forms. But what's the model that the East of England Co-op operate?
So we're continually looking at our membership proposition to make sure it's relevant for the modern day. At the moment, the membership proposition is the more you spend, the more you earn. So we pay a dividend based on your purchasing, not on your shareholding. Everyone gets a share. Everyone's got a right to vote in the elections. We just had a load of local elections, and we've got our annual members meeting on the 18th of May. And then we'll have director elections, and all our directors are democratically elected. We've had over 4,500 votes to date. We're hoping to get over 5,000 when we get to the election. So a reasonable turnout given the size of our organisation in the region.
Now, you can stop me if this is an inappropriate question, but it surely cannot be a unique observation that you have, according to the annual report, two directors named Fox and Chicken.
I know, yeah, we do laugh at that. One of them hasn't always been a fox, but name change. But yeah, and unfortunately, Mrs. Fox is leaving at the end of this year. Her term is up, so we won't have a chicken and a fox anymore.
Well, I hope the chicken family invite her to dinner so she can be a fox
very much so.
Amongst the chickens. And on that note, I want to just draw attention to the work that is highlighted in the annual report about your progress on particularly carbon dioxide reduction, because I know there'll be a lot of people who listen to this podcast who really feel that sustainability and progress towards net zero is so important. And your progress has really been remarkable. 16, I do the standard journalistic thing of rounding up, rounding down accordingly, but 16,000 metric tons down to 11,000 metric tons. I mean, COVID obviously played a role in that, but you've kept that going. It hasn't jumped back up now. Everything opens back up. It's kept on. You kept on pressing it down. So, can you explain to us how you've achieved that?
Well, it's a lot of hard work. We've got a head of sustainability, Steve, who does a lot of work in this area, along with lots of it. We're trying to embed it throughout the organisation. So we've managed to. We're talking today. We've had our energy update, and we've managed to save £17,000 in this building by fixing the aircon to a certain temperature without letting people fiddle. So over 3 months. So that's just in one little thing. We've looked at beer fridges when they need to be on. Energy is a huge cost for us. It's one of the regions we've made a loss in the last financial year, and we've got to be better at managing it. We want to reduce our energy consumption. It's the right thing to do, and you've got to take it in chunks and bite-sized pieces, and it's like this is like building Rome, isn't it? One brick at a time.
Yeah.
But as a region, I mean, from my time at the LEP, the clean growth region, the opportunities this region has to really supercharge some of this stuff, build some of the infrastructure that they can go help globally rather than just thinking about national stuff, I think.
Well, I can't do better than to quote Peter Aldous, the co-chair of the East of England All-Party Parliamentary Group, who is also the Member of Parliament for currently what is Waveney, what will become if he's returned the lowest off seat. And he put it thus: we are the region that can keep the country's lights on all by ourselves. And I think that's a wonderful thing, that we've got that potential that you've identified so brilliantly there. But I mean, all credit to you for all that hard work because it's showing. And that, again, we're coming back to being leaders in that field. You've answered so many questions already. I'm just filtering down. So corporately, for the East of England Co-op, I had a challenge writing this, so I'm trying to shorthand the East of England Cooperative. For the society, what has been the greatest, challenge, excluding COVID and the tail of COVID, in the last 12 months for the co-op?
Financially, the biggest challenge has been the increase in energy prices. But I think wider than that, and wider than 12 months, is the pace of change. The pace that we've got to operate as an organisation, it's relentless, and we've got to get the basics right, and you've got to continually to focus on the basics, but then keep trying to keep ahead of the curve, trying to keep 20 moves ahead. So I think that's the biggest challenge for us and lots of businesses. I think you can't just focus on the data. You can't just focus on the day-to-day. You've got to stick your head above the parapet. You've got to look around, and you've got to make some big bets. If you want to grow the organisation, we've got to look ahead and think, right, that's where we've got to stick our resources. And we don't have unlimited resources. No one does anymore. So you've got to be really focused, really think ahead.
Yeah, you've done it again. Look, you've answered it already. The report also talks about the investment portfolio, which I was quite interested in, and just ask you to describe it, because it's really kind of compensated for what was a small fall in turnover. But what does that portfolio look like, and how you manage that in accordance with your? I mean, I'm not saying it's difficult to do this. I'm just interested to know how it's managed in accordance with co-op principles.
So we have 122 million of investment property, and that's a mixture of light industrial units, retail units, commercial units of a wide variety, and also residential properties. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, numbers of food stores, sometimes they have flats above. Yeah. And then there's certain houses that we've developed over time. So we've got about 250 residential properties, houses and flats, and about 260, 250 in commercial property units. So they generate a rental income of about £9 million. There's a great team who manages that property. And then over time you end up with development sites. So we used to have some department stores, they needed converting. We converted the department store in Colchester to flats, foundation house. Then we've got rid of the old department store in Ipswich was sold, and that's going to be a school and some other things.
Oh, wow.
So there's all those property developments as part of that. So they produce a nice, steady contribution that helps us fund it, and we do that all do the right thing. So we make sure we're a responsible landlord, make sure everything's fixed on time, make sure we've got the right make sure the fire alarms are all in place, and go above and beyond sort of things. That's
coming through in what we're talking about, and I'm just curious to ask, and some might say that I'm bound to ask this given my backstory, having been involved in drafting the Self-Build and Custom House Building Act. Has the East of England Co-op considered offering members self-build plots and that you can prepare, or because I think that would be lovely. I'm not saying I've thought very deeply about it, but it sounds like a lovely thing to do.
I haven't even crossed my mind, to be honest, mate, but it's something we can look at. We don't have plethora of lots of the development sites. We are more industrial and commercial, but that is interesting thought. So
I mean, I think just with the principles you've put across, that I would want to work with the East of England Co-op on a project like that. But that aside, food justice, tremendously important issue at the moment. I speak as someone. I take my daughter to a trampoline class on Tuesday evenings, and until fairly recently, what was in the sports hall immediately before we went in was a warm bank, and that really kind of struck me as this can't be right in this day and age. But the food justice proposition, could you just talk us through why that's so important, and what the East of England Co-op are doing, or in what food justice means to the East of England Co-op?
I mean, it means everything. We're reliant on our members, our customers, and our colleagues, and we know we're facing a cost of living crisis. We've got to be supportive in as many ways as we can. I mean, we have to remember that we want to make a positive local impact, and to do that, we want to use our profit to make a positive local impact. So we need to generate profit. We're not a charity, but we know we need to support our communities. So we've got to get the balance right. So we've invested over £400,000 in communities over the last sort of financial year. Food justice is important. You know, we're a food retailer. It's important that we try and support people food. And so, yeah, it's a really important part. And it's that and funeral poverty as well. So we want people to be able to give their loved ones a suitable service when they sadly pass away. So it's very important to us because our communities and the region is very important to us.
Could you give us a hint about the year ahead for the co-op? Because the annual report kind of drops a few hints about exciting plans ahead.
Well, I think we know we can't sustain the losses we have, so we need to invest in our future. We want to grow. We need to get back to being a profitable organisation. We've got a plan to do that. That involves opening new stores in new areas. It involves simplifying some of our operations. It includes getting the basics right so that we can springboard and leapfrog where we are. We are seeing some good numbers. We are in our food business where we're doing well in terms of volume growth. We're getting more than our share of the wallet, and that's, you know, the food retail market in the UK is incredibly competitive, one of the most competitive in the world. Mm-hmm. You know, we're talking about, I mean, you could name nearly 10 different food retailers in the country, all after £70 million people's worth of spend. Mm-hmm. So it's incredibly competitive. So you're gonna have to work there. We want to invest in our funeral business. There's property developments we want to do. So we're very focused on getting back to profitability, and then because that means we can do more for our communities.
It really strikes me from what you're saying that the East of England Co-op is a very agile, adaptable organisation that, I don't want to say unsentimental, but I suppose practical, and that's a really strong and good trait to have, I think, in this day and age where a lot of public policy is being decided on feelings rather than sound evidence. I'm not going into any more detail than that, but it sounds like you've got your core values are there and beyond doubt. So around those, we can be practical, we can be nimble. Does that strike a chord? Have I got there?
Yeah, we're working hard to get. I think we want to be even better at that. Mike, I think you're right. We can be like that. We need to get even better. We need to build capability, and that means attracting talent to the region. That means dealing with data. We're trying to be data-led. So we are pulling all those strands together. I think businesses can be incredibly complicated, and they can have lots of competing priorities, voices, data, and it's trying to work our way through those, navigating those to get the right answer. And it's about getting the right answer. Not, I can't think of the phrase now. About it's not about being right. It's about getting it right. Yeah, BS, right? It's not about being right all the time. It's about getting it right. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to work hard to do that. I'm sure we will make mistakes because we're playing to win now and not playing not to lose.
I think it's we spend more time doing good than feeling good.
Yeah,
kind of thing. Because a change can be uncomfortable. I just want to pull on a thread. You've left dangling. You've teed up for me there. You're talking about getting in the right people. And it's interesting because this is a conversation that's come up on the podcast. It come up in the podcast before, particularly with Nigel Cushion of Nelson Spirit, and Nigel's very involved. If you haven't heard that episode, dear listener, I suggest you go back and listen. It's fantastic. Nigel's brilliant, as is Charlotte Pounder on his team, and talking about Home First and encouraging people who've come to the end of their sort of A-level, considering where they're going to university, to perhaps put some time in at home before they go off. And kind of what we got to, and there is a point here, bear with me. The flip side of that is that if you look, and some work exists on this, and I've quoted it many times, at returnees, that is, students who've gone off to university, made their careers outside our region, east of England by a long, long way has the highest number who then come back. And in our case, get brought back along with them. And I know that there's a temptation to frame that as, oh dear, all our young people are going away. And I think and I'm going to ask you to reflect on this in a second, and I think there's some degree, but we're never going to be able to offer them much of the bright lights big city, apart from, those specific degree courses in the region that, exist in places, and those, they've got the virus anyway. But we are benefiting from expensive skills and experience being accrued elsewhere that people are coming back now for our quality of life. And it's a fantastic thing. So just ask you to reflect on my very long burble about making the best out of the fact that, yes, young people want to go away, but what a magnet we have to pull them back.
Well, I think I think you're absolutely right, Mike. I think one of our values, we said we want to be a place for people to grow, so we want to grow our own, because that's just as important. But you're absolutely right. If they're going away, getting the skills and experience that can help supercharge and turbocharge our business, everyone's got to do what's right for them. And we can't be shoehorning people in or stay in the region. They've got to do what's right for them and that stage of life. I think high performance is, about doing the best you can with what you've got where you are. And that changes over time, doesn't it? So I think absolutely people going away, gaining experience, and then the key thing is being able to apply, having somewhere to be able to apply it, and having that sort of that scope to be able to apply it and to help grow businesses and grow the region, then absolutely.
So what's the East of England Co-op approach to bringing in top talent and sort of nurturing it and taking those skills that... Do you ever find, I suppose, do you ever find yourself looking at people who at first glance might seem a curious fit, but you can see something perhaps in them that makes their skill set that makes them really valuable? I don't know where I'm going with this.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it goes back to a comment we talked about earlier about leadership, isn't it? If you've got good leaders, they can be more flexible and agile. So I think, yes, so we've got to work hard. It's certainly not an area that I'd say we're proficient in yet. It's an area we're working on. We want to do the right thing. It's all about attitude, isn't it? And the attitude, the right attitude and the right values, and then making sure that we learn and evolve. So, I think the funeral business is a great example. We've tried we've not always brought in funeral people to lead that team, because that's not always the way that's going to deliver the best outcome. So the last couple of funeral people have had very contrasting backgrounds. One's been in food, retail and clothing. One's been in the betting industry, but they've got people management skills and skills that will help us accelerate our business. So yes, being open-minded. I think there's a great Adam Grant book who's read Rethink, which is brilliant about just thinking and how to approach things differently.
I mean, we're coming on very... before we get on to... I want to talk... You indicated and I think it's been a theme through what you've been saying about the play to win mindset. And I just want to explore that in a bit depth. But before we do, there's something that jumped out at me in the annual report. And I want to ask, what was or what is the Co-op Guide to Dating?
Oh, it's a food waste... food is dating on food products. So it went very big, actually. It went global. We were getting requests for, I think my colleague at the time was interviewed from New Zealand and got asked to an Italian interview. So it's about explaining how best before and sell before dates work, so that people actually know what they're doing rather than just thinking they do.
I think my approach has been best before, it's fine. And used by, give it a sniff, it's probably fine. But that's not necessarily the best one. But I'll have to look that up, because I just thought, oh, how strange. And now I know. So, there's a quote that I've just put up on LinkedIn for anyone who cares to look. I found it as I was looking through, and I've sort of printed out his blog on this here, on the play to win mindset. And before we do, actually, scrap that. Before we get into sort of Roger Crawford's quote and his various, he's got four headlines about the play to win mindset. What does the play to win mindset mean to you, Doug Field?
It means not settling. It means doing your best. It means not avoiding, being prepared to take risks, being prepared to fail, but learning from them. It's about learning and that sort of learning mindset and looking for areas to improve.
And so how are you embodying that in how you're leading the East of England Co-op?
It's still very early stages, but very much trying to sort of make sure we've got the right processes, make sure we've got the right rhythm and routine, that we're looking at certainly that sort of, it's easy to say to sort of not blame, but, someone delivers bad news, it's not their fault. You can't be shooting the messenger, so you've got to live it through your behaviours. And it's not easy because we are naturally, or I particularly, can be a naturally negative person. I have to work really hard to be more optimistic and things like that. So, but I think I'm doing okay at it. And I think it's just about wanting to be grown, it's being curious and wanting to do better, but being prepared to take a risk just because it's the right thing to do.
I think everyone, myself included, gets those sort of times when you just think, what am I doing? And you wonder to yourself, have I made a terrible mistake? But then again, things do turn around. But this Roger Crawford, who's a speaker from the USA, and his quote is, "Winners spend little, if any, energy worrying about their weaknesses. Instead, they work on cultivating their strengths." Now, that's something that I had a lady called Rena Dial, who's a coach. I was working with the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor. Eastern Promise was working with the Cambridge Norwich Tech Corridor to produce a series of podcasts, and she was one of the guests that the Corridor team, the LEP, put forward, and hugely inspirational. And she was sort of describing this to me. Again, go back and listen to that one on the feed. But that we get far better results focusing on the strengths of an individual has than worrying about where we're weak. And that if we lift the strengths, then everything will come up along with it.
Absolutely.
Just ask you to reflect on that.
No, that's really, it's a much better answer than I gave but it's right, we want to be the best in convenience retail. We know we can win. We've got examples in Colchester, East Harlyn, Needham Market, and that's what we're focused on. That's how part of our route back to profitability. We know we can do the same in funeral. So it's about being the best and it's about building on our strengths. So absolutely building on those capabilities and being that sort of focused on those strengths. Yeah, absolutely right.
I think one of the downsides of the democratic process is that it favours that kind of engagement with what's wrong. Because if you're an opposition party, naturally you want to talk about what's wrong. But it doesn't necessarily lead to any kind of solution. You can certainly try, but it's. I noticed that when everyone comes together, that's when, particularly in that sphere, and I'm trying to step very carefully here, that the solutions really come about. Believe in yourself. That's one of Roger Crawford's number one. Believe in yourself, and I think you've already articulated this brilliantly. But again, how does Doug Field believe in himself?
Not actually.
Or how do you help your team believe in themselves?
Oh, that's different. That's easier. But I think no. I think you just got to be. There's some really good stuff. The Microsoft CEO, I can't pronounce his name properly, Satya Nadella. He has a really good thing about model, coach, care. Model behaviours you want to see, coach behaviours, and care for the people. And genuinely caring for people, generally knowing about them, really does help you get to know them. If you get to know them, you can coach them better. So, and you can know where their strengths are or where their weaknesses and where they need to be pushed and where they, because a strength can be weakness, can't it? If you overplay a strength, that can be to the negative detriment as well. So,
and you can certainly also reframe, as we talked about earlier, reframe weaknesses into strengths. And I think that's something that perhaps the East of England needs to get better at.
Yeah.
I mean, not everywhere, but the next one is, and I confess I'm not necessarily sure what he means by this, is plan your path. And that's kind of what you're trying to do, isn't it, really?
Well, I think it is. I think you've got to be, you might want to plan your path, but you've got to be flexible on the route. So we're very much trying to have some serious ambitions about where we want to get to, but recognising that, there are obstacles in the way, but those obstacles are what, there's a fantastic book called Obstacle is a Way by Ryan Holiday. And, life is full of obstacles. It's how you deal with those obstacles that's going to make you, whether you get to the end of the path or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, there's a certain mindset, I think, that enjoys. I'm someone I'm a very much sweating the small stuff person, but when the excrement collides with the cooling device, that's tend to be where I switch. My brain sort of really turns on, and I remember the expenses scandal, and that morning sort of sat around, and I said, I remember someone doing an interview. Is it wrong that I'm really kind of excited and getting my teeth into this? Because it's not great. Let's face it, it's not great. It's bad for the country, bad for democracy, bad for it all. But it was like, this is brilliant.
Yeah, it's what energises you, isn't it? And about that level of energy, harnessing that energy, and people are more, going back to the strengths point, people are more energised by utilising their strengths and having to adapt their weaknesses.
Do you ever have an issue with yourself or your team, whether it's the management team, the wider family, with and this is something I think we've all got to be. Yes, that energy is great, but it isn't. There comes a point when the elastic has to relax.
Yes,
it has to, and you can't keep. I mean, that's probably why my career first life came to the first act, should we say, came to a close because the elastic finally snapped. So how do you encourage those under you, your team, your family, and I use family in the corporate sense, not to yes, that energy's great, but don't rely on it to carry you through indefinitely. There needs to be a period of rest, relaxation.
Oh, absolutely. We need to look after yourself first, isn't it? It's the whole oxygen mask on the airplane, isn't it? Got to look after yourself. Got to be self-care. Got to make sure that you're not burning the candle at both ends and all that sustainable stuff. We've got some great programs here about well-being. We've all been we work with Suffolk Mind on that and a program across our organisation. So, but yes, you've got to be very focused on that. And I know it's important to me as an individual that I look after myself, because you want to be the best you can be. You've got to be looking at that. You've got to be operating at the right level. And if you're not looking after yourself, that's harder to do.
So how do you do that? How do you?
I've just got some routines. I get up particularly early, make sure I do some exercise. I eat most of the time relatively healthily. I like getting out with the dog at the weekends. I got 3 young kids, so that keeps me active.
Yeah, that'll keep you active.
So yeah, but you're just conscious of it, and I am trying to develop a better mindfulness routine, but that I find that harder.
It is hard, yeah.
But I am. Managed it this morning, so a little bit more. But yeah, I find that a bit harder. But yeah, no. So you just got to, I think I describe myself as a failed athlete. I always wanted to do sport at school, but I didn't have the physical attributes. There's loads of stuff about how you're training, but I try and take that sportsman type of approach to performance to myself now in my chosen career.
I mean, it's interesting because it's easy to see how some in the business world see when a member of the team does the extra mile. That doesn't mean then that everything they do from then on is 1 mile greater. It means that they've made a special effort, and you can't expect them to keep it up. But anyway, and now value the process. Now let me just scroll through and see what our friend Roger Crawford here means by value the process. Says he. I'll be able to find it.
There's loads of stuff like this, Mike.
Go on then, go for it.
So there's a really famous American football coach called Bill Walsh. He's got a book called "The Score Takes Care of Itself," and it's all about focusing on the process, not the outcomes. And there's loads of research about this at the moment, I think. So if you focus on the process, the outcomes will take care of themselves. And to value the process, you've got to value that rhythm routine. I think all about that. And for us, we're describing that as brilliant basics.
I mean, that's one of the things I enjoy about doing the podcast, is that every week, Wednesday, thankfully I'm ahead of the curve this week. It's already uploaded and ready to go. But that process of getting it up on is kind of an important ritual in itself. Find your sweet spot.
That's about being the best. I think that goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about before, about being the best you can be with what you've got. So our sweet spots: convenient food retail, funeral, investment property, travel. Yeah, so we're trying to describe that sweet spot. And then the big challenge for us is getting it embedded across the organisation and being able to have that man on the moon conversation with the person sweeping the floor in the space centre.
And I suppose it's easy to see. How do you draw the line between being an ambitious business and being an over-ambitious business? And sort of, how do you know? Is it because your team tell you, or because there's no consensus behind it, or what, that you don't move that business out of your sweet spot?
I think the answer to that makes you a millionaire if you get that right.
All right, okay.
So I think it's a real challenge. If you're over ambitious, you can end up losing the business, can't you? If you're not ambitious enough, you end up losing the business. So I think it's about it goes back to the you said about navigating that path and making sure you're doing it, but being open-minded and stuff. I think there was a really interesting podcast with Lord Billamori, the Cobra Beer person I heard, and he said, what you need to tell entrepreneurs is don't give up, but you also need to tell them to know when to give up.
Yes, that's weird,
there is no, and I think the point is there's no right answer. And if you pursue one course of action too doggedly, you might, that might be detriment. But if you flip flop around, that's to a detriment. And that's the skill of leadership, isn't it? Trying to work out what the path is, what the route is, and what the destination is.
Yeah. The last one is stay positive, you've sort of alluded to, I think we've talked about this already, but you've alluded to the fact that you've got to fight against the tendency to go negative in your own mind. Is there a particular way you like to stay positive?
I read a book about self-talk, and just a lot about reframing, isn't it? Looking at it and trying to, if you want to improve, you need the feedback, you need to look for ways to do things. So I think it's about finding a way and being positive, and the people around you make a difference, isn't it? You're influenced by the people you have around you, so that's another factor as well. But it's not a straightforward answer to that, is it?
No. So just to sort of start rounding off, what is it about the East of England? Because you've been in a position as your former chair of the LEP, the New Anglia LEP, and obviously you're a leader of a major retail operation in the East of England. What is it that you think is the this is going to sound a stupid question, because by definition, I was going to ask, what's the X factor? Now, by definition, you don't know what the X factor is, but what would you say is the X factor of the East of England?
That is a tough question. I think there's such a quandary there, because there's such a combination, isn't there? You've got some fantastic geography and landscape that's not replicated. You've got some amazingly big skies. So you've got an environment, and then that attracts a certain type of people, and those people are across a wide spectrum. So you've got a diverse group, and I think that in itself is the X factor. And then you've got I suppose the sun rises in this part of the world, and that's what we've got to get on the back on. We've got to take advantage of that. But I don't think I've got a answer. But there's so many. I think it goes back to the point you mentioned about the jigsaw. We've got so many pieces of jigsaw, and if we could put them all together, and 2 + 2 = 10, that's the magic. That's the magic formula.
Do you think that in certain parts of the region, and I'm thinking particularly the rural parts, where there's some really exciting potential around agriculture, agri-tech, where on food production, we can be I keep coming back to this theme of a series of virtuous circles between academia, agriculture, farming, food, life science. And do you think there is an attachment to an idea of particularly Norfolk and Suffolk, in Cambridge, their attachment is perhaps different, but nonetheless difficult, to a model, a way of living that really is fading away, and that we perhaps need to reevaluate how we think about our places. And I'm getting quite deep here, but and the counties, the towns, and the bits in between. to reevaluate what we're capable of.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think we've got to. It comes back to, I think the pace of change around the world is continuing. It is relentless, and I think you're right. I think being adaptable, and that's why we're focusing a lot more on building that capability, because with that capability becomes more adaptability, and therefore, and what's luck when determination means opportunity. So opportunities will arise, but you've got to be in a position to grasp them. You've got to be in a position first to see them, then grasp them. And you're only going to do that if you're putting your head above the parapet and looking for the opportunities. And I think that's where we need to be. We focus. We need to be open-minded. We need to be, some of the best things are where you apply knowledge from one industry to another, and that's where you can get a competitive advantage. I think, but it's hard, and that's why it's not easy, and that's why. And when you factor in places and the number of stakeholders that places have, it becomes even more challenging.
I think you're right. It is you're looking at place, it is a very, very tough needle to thread, because it's their place.
Yeah.
And you can't turn up acting like you know what's best for their place. But by the same token, you have to factor in, but these places, there is no place we can put the pin and say this is the best this place will ever be. We have no right to do that. And it can be just as much loved for someone who isn't here yet as it is for you. And we all have our places. I think we all live in our places. Kind of, we hold them and maintain them on trust, as it were. We hold them in trust for future generations. But on that note, I do like to end, if I can, with a slightly left field question. Now, for our MPs, it's usually, which other MP would you like to be most trapped in an elevator with? Because let's face it, I've been in the elevators on the Parliamentary, and that's a highly likely circumstance. But I'm not going to ask you that. I did ask the former head of Forestry England in the region when the last time was he climbed a tree, and he could answer. And then I followed it up with, and what kind of tree was it? And he answered that as well. Doug Field OBE, when was the last time you shopped in an East of England co-op?
The weekend.
And what did you buy?
I think I bought crisps for the kids. But so there's one down the road from me, so yeah. So
Is it always a joy going in one of your stores? Or is it a bit nerve-wracking?
No, it is a joy. It's great to see the stores. It's great to get out. Yeah, no, it is I do enjoy it. So.
Well, Doug Field OBE, thank you for coming on Eastern Promise. What I love about the East of England Co-op and what it does is the way it embodies those principles. Those are principles that Eastern Promise supports, can get behind, and look forward to seeing East of England Co-op grow. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you really much for the opportunity. Really enjoyed it.
My huge thanks to Doug for his time and his support. Eastern Promise is hugely proud of the East of England Co-op and indeed all businesses in our region that seek to both embody strong values and conduct themselves accordingly. Our support of you will never be less than full-throated, and the mic is always open to you. No pun intended. And now, good friends, good food, and conversation that sparkles like wine. There are few more refined forms of human interaction than the dinner party. And it's this refinement Eastern Promise hopes to capture with the Eastern Promise Dining Club, which we'll be recording later this year. But until then, let's fold a napkin or two and check the place settings for a vichyssoise fork on this week's
Crowd Sorcery.
Yes, crowd sorcery. For an aperitif, let's begin with Tom Abbott of the Green Easy Sustainable Consultancy. Tom sticks with the local theme. How about former Gresham student James Dyson, Walberswick resident Richard Curtis, and Dennington villager Ed Sheeran? All creative and innovative in different ways. No argument here, Tom. And plenty of local connections. Great suggestions all, as are those of Tim Robinson, Chief Operating Officer at Tech East, who offers a mix of the current crop and the dearly departed. Delia Smith, Beth Orton, Brian Eno, Maggie Hambling, Richard Ayoade, Sir Bobby Robson, Sister Wendy, Ray Fiennes, Brian Cant, that takes me back, and Nick Kershaw. Sticking with the musical theme is Dr. Catherine Gelbert-Thick of Acuity Limited, who says, Defo Ed Sheeran, and how about Paloma Faith? Sade. I'd quite like a conversation with Stephen Fry too. Wouldn't we all? And Michelle Chambers, Business Development Manager at Chaplin Farrant, agrees. Yes, she says, definitely Stephen Fry. Thank you, Michelle, but I couldn't not finish with the, turbulent suggestions of Saul Humphrey, Managing Partner of Saul D. Humphrey LLP, Certified B Corporation, Professor at Anglia Ruskin University, Chair of Institute of Directors Norfolk, Chair of New Anglia LEP's Building Growth Group, and a Non-Executive Director to boot. We need some controversy/debate, Mike, says Saul. How about your old friend, and mine, Richard Bacon MP? And then ask Clive Lewis MP or Alan Waters for balance. Now, I'm not sure I'd be the right host for that sort of party. I'm looking for an exploration of ideas and the art of the possible. Dr. Humphrey, however, is seeking a frisson of fracas over his first course and a jot of tension in his after-dinner tipple. Say, Saul, what if we went for Liz Truss and George Monbiot? Well, the dining club needs to start somewhere. So, here I am, at one of the East of England's fanciest restaurants, for the inaugural meal of the Eastern Promise Dining Club. Yeah, I've just stepped out to speak to you, and in our fantastic private dining room, I've taken Saul's suggestion, and we've got the former Prime Minister and MP for South Norfolk, Liz Truss, along with writer, broadcaster, and environmental campaigner George Monbiot, plus a handful of guests from across the region who've kindly bought tickets to be a part of this vibrant and incisive after-dinner conversation, which Engineer 49 is recording as we speak to share with you all at a later date. Yeah. And I must say, my fears appear to have been unfounded, and the debate has been robust but respectful with very few cross words. I mean to say, Miss Truss and Mr. Monbiot may be poles apart on many issues, but they are both more than capable of conducting themselves with decorum. Because it's, utter, piffle to suggest that people with wildly differing views can't hold a civilised and, let's just better take a look and... Oh, dear God, what's going on? Oh, Miss Truss, Mr. Monbiot, please sit down. I'm warning you. Oh, not the raspberry pavlova. I hadn't had any yet. Engineer 49, put the pan down. Put the pan... No, not like that. I'll get a cloth. For the avoidance of doubt, no former Prime Ministers were harmed in the making of that spoof. Now, the real Eastern Promise Dining Club will involve one or two special guests from the region around a dinner table where the pre, during and after dinner conversation will be recorded and shared with listeners on the podcast. Would-be diners will have the opportunity to purchase one of an extremely limited number of tickets to join the conversation, or, if you wish, you can sponsor the whole table and all tickets are yours. If you'd like to be involved in the real Eastern Promise Dining Club and can offer a table or sponsor a meal, do get in touch with me at mike@easternpromise.site or visit easternpromise.org.uk and fill out the contact form, putting Dining Club in the subject line. And that's all for episode 64 of Eastern Promise. I was Mike Rigby, and will continue so to be. My thanks to Doug Field OBE and all at the East of England Co-op for their very warm welcome to Whersted Park. My thanks to all my crowd sorcerers and to Engineer 49. Now, fun fact, When we're on a team outing to the pub, Engineer 49 always has whatever I'm having. As a sound engineer, he likes to see what you're drinking and then have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And to you, dear listener, thank you for your company. I really enjoy having so many people listening and taking part. Next week, I'm joined by Dr. Johanna Forster and Dr. Ben Little of the University of East Anglia's Civic University programme, where we'll be diving into what their brilliant civic engagement work means for the university and the region, as well as hearing some truly inspirational stories that have emerged from their work so far. It's a hugely enjoyable interview, and I hope you'll join me next week to listen in. Until then, bye for now. Eastern Promise is a Priors Croft production for the Eastern Promise East Anglia Community Interest Company.